El Paso, Texas will be using 2 schools, a convention center, and hotels to house expected migrant overflow ahead of Title 42's expiration on May 11th, NewsNation reports.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas visited the southern border this week, but GOP Representative Anthony Despacito says the visit is, quote, too little, too late, and that Mayorkas needs, quote, to be impeached. NewsNation border correspondent Allie Bradley is on the ground in the Rio Grande Valley near San Antonio and joins us now to weigh in. Thanks for coming on, Allie.
Yeah, glad to be here, you guys. We're actually waiting just outside of a parking garage here in Brownsville, where a lot of migrants who have been processed are released. And we're actually waiting for Secretary Mayorkas. This is kind of a planned stop that the media wasn't aware of. However, his advance team is here. So we're kind of staking it out to see if the secretary will, in fact, be here to see kind of what you're seeing here behind me. These are where a lot of single adults are being dropped off after being processed by Border Patrol. Now, I've been walking around talking with them. The majority of them are from Venezuela. And it's really interesting here, you guys, because right now, this administration is talking about these kind of fail-safes that are in place when Title 42 ends on May 11th. One of those fail-safes that they've created was what they called the Venezuela policy back in October, which they since have expanded to Haitian migrants, Cuban migrants, and migrants from Nicaragua. However, migrants that we're talking to are actually not being expelled under that policy. The policy says if people come across between ports of entry and not through the CBP1 app with an appointment, they will be returned immediately to Mexico. That is not happening. We are talking with migrants who are here alone, who do not have family in the States, who are here to work, single adult men who are from Venezuela, who swam across the river from Matamoros, not at a port of entry, and they are not being returned, you guys. We have talked to many migrants who that is the same story. And this gentleman crossed with about 6 guys. Again, they are not here to meet up with family. They're here to work, and they're crossing between the ports. So it begs the question of what is going to happen and what policies are actually going to be enforced when Title 42 ends.
Ali, thanks for that update. It begs the question, where do you think the wires are being miscrossed here? Because we've heard from Vice President Harris the do not come messaging specifically to individuals traveling from the Northern Triangle countries. We've heard from various leaders in the Biden administration that the end of this COVID era regulation does not mean that our border is open. And yet we're still seeing this and anticipating even more migrants who are going to take that journey, that perilous journey to the United States. Quite frankly, to your point a moment ago, even those who do not have children. We know that there are several people who argue for the benefit of their children that they need to leave to seek asylum here and things like that. But this seems like, at least from the reporting I just heard, that this is more about a sustainable economy, about finding jobs. Where do we stand there? Where are the wires miscrossed?
Yeah, so we actually talked with Nelson from Venezuela, who tells us that he left because it was just unsafe. It wasn't because of Title 42. But what they're telling me is that the messaging is getting lost out there because they're being told it is safe right now to cross. Right now, they'll have safe passage and be able to get here. And his story is really interesting. We'll be sharing it on NewsNation here this afternoon. But he actually crossed from Juarez into El Paso and was turned back in Nogales, Arizona. So he actually was kicked back after being processed. This was not a Title 42 return. In Arizona, they hopped on a train illegally, very unsafe, he says, to get back to Matamoros because that's where they were told they could cross and make it across. Now, we talked with Carlos yesterday who said he swam across, but if you can't swim, you can pay $10 to wade across. So there is messaging that is being mixed that the cartel is controlling on the Mexico side because the fact of the matter is this. If these migrants don't believe that they have a viable option to enter into the United States and can do it safely, they're going to stop trying. So the cartel has to maintain that the messaging is that they can get here safely and start a new life, whether it's by themselves or with their families. The cartel has to control that message that they can get them here safely, or else that criminal organization does not make money because that revolving door will close.
Well, the volatile U.S. immigration policies are certainly making that messaging easier for the cartels, right? We've had, of course, the changeover in administration and change in a number of enforcement policies there. We have the Flores settlement regarding minors, both unaccompanied and accompanied minors across our border. We have this Title II. Which, I mean, I just want to back up and say how ridiculous it is that we are desperately trying to figure out what's going to happen to, when an emergency measure expires, because the underlying U.S. immigration law and enforcement is such a mess. How is that volatility? You told us a little bit about migrants who are not actually reliant on Title 42 or not waiting for the expiration of Title 42. How's that underlying volatility, though, playing out at the border? Are you hearing things about what's happening across the border from a lot of these folks? How much of this information and conflicting information that you're pointing to is circulating on both sides of the border?
Yeah, since I've been covering this for about 2 years, the messaging has been crossed. We have seen the wires crossed. And what I'm seeing here today and what I saw months ago is that they believe the border is open. That is the conversations being had. So that is what they're being told over there. But when it comes to being on this side of the border and the volatility of these policies, we're talking about Title 8, which is the policy that the administration is saying they're going to be using, and they are using amid Title 42 ending. But the other issue with that is Title 8 is only good if their facilities can hold people. And right now the facilities can't. So the majority of migrants are being released with a notice to appear or an NTA, which is what those manila envelopes are that you're seeing them carrying. Those are their documents to go to their final destination, where they'll link up with an ICE office. A lot of them are given a cell phone. Nelson showed us his cell phone. He said he can only check in with ICE on Thursdays. He was actually afraid to turn it on. He said if anything happens to that cell phone, he'll be charged $1,500. So that's how they're meeting up with ICE. He's supposed to check in every Thursday using that device, and that is through Title 8. That is what the administration is calling a removal proceeding. And then they might not get a court date for 2 to 5 years because, as you were mentioning, our immigration system is a mess, and our court backlog is, some people are, what I'm understanding is 10 years. Some of them aren't seeing a judge. So we have a massive court backlog on top of variances in these policies and enforcement variances. And it's kind of arbitrary, depending on where you're crossing and who you are and who you're crossing with. That might determine if you can get in. Like I said, Nelson crossed in Juarez over in El Paso. He was kicked back, but apparently he was let in after crossing into Brownsville from Matamoros. So it just depends on where, when, how. All of those things are arbitrary measures when it comes to someone's livelihood and their legality of being in this country.
And Ali, how are border towns preparing, and is Mexico a good faith partner in this? Because we've heard from leaders in the Biden administration that obviously discussions have been ongoing with Mexico and that Mexico is working with us. But it doesn't always seem as though that is the case. And it might be cartel related, as you previously stated. But how are the border towns preparing for this would-be influx, or the influx that is happening? And where do you think Mexico stands in this in terms of a partner with the United States and trying to quell some of the migrant flow?
Well, we've heard even President Obrador saying that there's no problem down there with the cartel and with fentanyl production down there. So we know that there are some issues with communication with the U.S. and working with Mexico. But when it comes to how Mexico is helping, I'm going to tell you this from experience and from what I know with a lot of these migrants. Mexico is distributing what they call humanitarian visas, and that is giving people the right to live and work in Mexico. So Mexico will come out and say, look, we're helping. We're providing these people 45 days to stay and live and work in our country. But here's what it does, you guys. The fact of the matter is this. It's a fast pass to our front door. These folks used to have to join into caravans in order to fight for these humanitarian visas that allowed them to bypass checkpoints. The caravans used to be their protection. They're no longer doing that because the caravans didn't work. So they're getting these humanitarian visas down in Tapachula, and then they're able to bypass every checkpoint and come right to our front door. So Mexico, and from where I stand, is helping this situation get worse, not hindering the flow of illegal immigration.
Ali Bradley, thank you so much for coming on and giving us a view into the chaos on the border. More Rising after this.